I'm 91 years old now. My hands shake when I hold a cup of coffee. My hearing's mostly gone. But I can still hear the screams. I can still hear them calling for me on that ridge. 75 of them, they say. 75 men I pulled back from the edge of hell while the world tried to kill us all. People call me a hero. I never felt like one. I was just a boy from Virginia who believed in God and couldn't bring myself to kill another man, even when that man was trying to kill me. They wanted to court-martial me for it. My own brothers-in-arms wanted me gone. But I stayed. And when the bullets flew and the mortars fell, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I saved them. Every one of them. I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia, in a house where the Bible sat on the kitchen table and my father's temper sat heavy in the air. We weren't rich. We weren't special. We were just poor mountain people trying to get by during the Depression years, when a nickel meant something and a job meant everything. My father fought in the First War. The Great War, they called it, though there wasn't anything great about what it did to him. He came back different, my mother said. Came back with the anger that lived in his bones. Sometimes that anger spilled out. Sometimes it spilled out at her. I was just a boy the night it happened. 12 years old, maybe 13. I heard them arguing downstairs, heard the voices getting louder, heard something break. I came down and saw my father with his hands on my mother, saw the fear in her eyes, saw my older brother Harold step between them. My father grabbed a gun. I don't remember thinking. I just remember moving. Remember grabbing that pistol from his hands, remember the weight of it, the cold metal against my palm. Remember looking at my father's face and seeing a man I didn't recognize. Remember thinking about Cain and Abel, about brother killing brother, about the commandment I'd learned in church every Sunday since I could walk. Thou shalt not kill. I ran from that house with the gun in my hands and I threw it as far as I could into the woods. And I made myself a promise that night, a promise I would keep even when keeping it nearly destroyed me. I would never take a life. Not ever. Not for any reason. The Seventh-day Adventist Church became my anchor. Saturday was our Sabbath, and we kept it holy. No work. No worldly concerns. Just worship and rest and remembrance of God's commandments. The sixth commandment most of all. I memorized scripture. Read my Bible until the pages wore thin. Found comfort in the idea that there was a right way to live, a code that didn't bend with convenience or circumstance. My faith wasn't just belief. It was the foundation of everything I was. When the war came, when Pearl Harbor burned and every young man I knew lined up to enlist, I knew I had to serve. I loved my country. I believed in stopping tyranny, in protecting the innocent. But I also believed that I could serve without killing. That I could be a soldier without being a killer. They had a term for men like me. Conscientious objector. Some people used it like a curse word. I enlisted anyway. Not as a combatant, but as a medic. I would save lives, I decided. I would run into the fire and pull my brothers out. I just wouldn't carry a gun to do it. That decision almost broke me before the war even started. Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Spring of 1942. The drill sergeants screamed at us from the moment our feet hit the ground. They wanted to turn us into killers. Efficient, obedient killers who could follow orders and not think too hard about the men on the other end of the rifle. I was assigned to the 77th Infantry Division, Company B, 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry Regiment. The men called themselves the Liberty Division. They were good men, most of them. Farm boys and factory workers and college kids who'd put their lives on hold to fight. But they didn't know what to make of me. Saturday came. Saturday, my Sabbath. I wouldn't drill. Wouldn't train. I spent the day in prayer and Bible study while the rest of the company ran exercises. The sergeants cursed me. Threatened me. Said I was setting a bad example, undermining discipline, making myself a target. The men were worse. They called me a coward. A shirka. A yellow-bellied preacher's boy who was too scared to fight like a man. They couldn't understand how someone could volunteer for war and refuse to touch a weapon. It didn't make sense to them. And what doesn't make sense to a soldier makes him angry. They threw things at me in the barracks. Boots. Helmets. Whatever was at hand. Called me every name you can imagine and a few I'd never heard before. I took it. What else could I do? I couldn't fight back. That would have made me everything they said I was. Captain Glover called me into his office one afternoon. Sat me down and looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his boot. Doss, he said, you're going to get men killed. You understand that? A medic who won't carry a gun is a liability. You're a liability. I told him I'd carry more bandages instead. More morphine. More blood plasma. Told him I'd be the best medic he'd ever seen. Told him my faith wouldn't stop me from doing my duty. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. They tried to discharge me. Said I was psychologically unfit. Filed papers with the command. I fought it. Went over their heads, wrote letters, refused to quit. The army had regulations for conscientious objectors, and I met every criteria. They couldn't force me out legally, even if they wanted to. So they kept me. But they didn't trust me. Not yet. Medic training was different from combat training. They taught us anatomy. Taught us how to stop bleeding, how to splint broken bones, how to identify shock and treat for it in the field. They taught us that our job wasn't to fight. Our job was to keep men alive long enough for the real doctors to save them. We learned to work fast. In combat, you had seconds, not minutes. Seconds to apply a tourniquet. Seconds to stuff a wound with gauze. Seconds to inject morphine and mark the man's forehead with an M so the next medic would know he'd already had a dose. We learned to ignore the screaming. The human mind can't process that much pain, that much fear, that much desperation all at once. You had to shut it out. Focus on the hands. Focus on the wound. Focus on the task. I was good at it. Better than most. My instructor said I had steady hands, a calm temperament. Said I didn't panic under pressure. I think it was the prayer. Before every training exercise I prayed. Asked God to guide my hands, to give me the strength to do what needed doing. I still wouldn't touch a rifle. The other men in my unit started to come around slowly. They saw that I wasn't afraid of the training, wasn't afraid of the blood or the screaming, or the simulated chaos. They saw that I worked hard, that I studied, that I took the job seriously. But trust? Trust had to be earned in fire. We shipped out in the spring of 1944. Boarded a transport ship bound for the Pacific. Most of the men had never been on a ship before. Never seen the ocean stretch out to the horizon like a gray eternity. We were crammed below decks like cattle, sleeping in bunks stacked 4 high, breathing air that smelled like diesel fuel and vomit. I was married by then. Dorothy Schutte. The most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. We'd gotten married before I shipped out, spent one perfect day together as husband and wife before the army took me away. I carried her picture in my helmet. Looked at it every night before I slept. I wondered if I'd ever see her again. The Pacific wasn't like Europe. There were no grand cities, no historic battlefields. Just islands. Tiny specks of jungle and rock scattered across an ocean so vast it made you feel like the smallest thing in creation. The Japanese had fortified these islands. Turned them into death traps. We were going to take them back, one bloody island at a time. Guam was my first real combat. July 21, 1944. We hit the beach in landing craft, and the world exploded. Japanese artillery had the beach zeroed in. Shells fell like rain. Men screamed. Men died before their boots touched sand. I ran across that beach with my aid bag and nothing else. No rifle. No pistol. Just medical supplies and a prayer on my lips. The noise was indescribable. Like standing inside a thunderstorm made of metal and hate. Bullets snapped past my head. Sand erupted in geysers where machine gun rounds hit. A man went down in front of me. Private Hernandez. Took a round through the thigh. Arterial hit. Blood pumping out in rhythm with his heartbeat. He had maybe 2 minutes before he bled out. I dropped beside him. Didn't think. Didn't hesitate. Tore open my aid bag, pulled out a tourniquet, cinched it tight above the wound. He screamed. Screamed so loud I heard it over the artillery. But the bleeding slowed. Stopped. I dragged him to cover behind a disabled tank. Left him there with another wounded man and ran back into the fire. 3 more men went down. Then 5. Then I lost count. I moved from crater to crater, treating wounds, injecting morphine, stopping blood. My uniform was soaked in it. My hands were red to the wrists. But I kept moving. The men saw me. Saw me running through fire unarmed. Saw me patching holes and dragging bodies and doing it all without a weapon to protect myself. Something changed in their eyes. We took Guam. Took it at a terrible cost. I treated 47 men in the first 3 days of fighting. Lost track after that. Some of them lived. Some of them didn't. But I tried. I tried for every single one. Captain Glover found me on the 4th day. I was sitting in a shell crater, washing blood off my hands with canteen water. He sat down beside me. "You did good, Doss," he said. It was the first kind thing he'd ever said to me. Lately was rain and mud and jungle so thick you couldn't see 10 feet in front of your face. The Japanese defenders fought like men who knew they were already dead. No surrender. No retreat. Just fighting until a bullet or a grenade or a flamethrower ended it. We pushed inland through swamps that sucked at our boots. Through rivers that ran brown with runoff. Through heat that felt like a physical weight pressing down on your shoulders. Men dropped from exhaustion. From heat stroke. From diseases with names I couldn't pronounce. I treated them all. Malaria. Dengue fever. Dysentery. Infected wounds that turned septic in the humidity. Foot rot. Jungle ulcers. The tropics were trying to kill us just as surely as the Japanese were. We lost a lot of men on Leyte. Not all of them to bullets. I remember a boy named Willis. Couldn't have been more than 18. Got hit by sniper fire while we were crossing a clearing. Took the round in the chest. Collapsed lung. Sucking chest wound. I got to him fast, sealed the wound with a wrapper from a bandage pack, kept the air from rushing in and collapsing the other lung. He looked up at me with eyes that knew he was dying. "Don't let me die alone," he whispered. I held his hand. Prayed over him. Told him he was brave. Told him God was waiting for him. Told him his mother would be proud. He died while I was holding him. I think about Willis sometimes. Wonder what his life would have been. Wonder if he would have married, had children, grown old. Wonder if his mother ever forgave God for taking her boy. I wonder if I should have done more. Okinawa was going to be the big one. We knew it. Everyone knew it. It was the last stepping stone before Japan itself. The Japanese weren't going to let it go easy. We trained for months. Practiced amphibious assaults. Practiced treating mass casualties. Practiced staying alive in a kill zone. The officers told us to expect heavy resistance. Told us the Japanese had fortified every hill, every cave, every inch of ground. They told us casualties would be high. I wrote letters to Dorothy every night. Told her I loved her. Told her I was safe. Didn't tell her that I was terrified. Didn't tell her that I lay awake in my bunk wondering if this would be the operation that killed me. I prayed more than ever. Prayed for strength. Prayed for courage. Prayed that God would guide my hands and let me save just one more man. Just one more. We boarded the transports on a gray morning in March. The sea was rough. Men vomited over the rails. Some prayed. Some wrote letters they thought would be their last. Some just sat in silence, staring at nothing. I checked my aid bag one more time. Bandages. Morphine syringes. Sulfa powder. Plasma. Tourniquets. Everything I needed to keep men alive. Everything except a gun. April 1st, 1945. Easter Sunday. The irony wasn't lost on me. We hit the beaches expecting hell. Instead, we found nothing. No artillery. No machine guns. No resistance at all. We walked inland like we were on a training exercise. Men laughed nervously. Made jokes about the Japanese sleeping in. It was a trap. We knew it was a trap. They were letting us land. Letting us push inland. Drawing us into killing zones where they could slaughter us at their leisure. The trap closed 3 days later. Hacksaw Ridge. The name doesn't sound like much. Sounds like something you'd drive past on a country road without noticing. But it was hell. 400 feet of sheer rock face, topped with Japanese fortifications. Bunkers. Machine gun nests. Artillery positions. All of it aimed down at us. We called it Hacksaw Ridge because getting up it was like climbing into a saw blade. May 4, 1945. We got the order to take the ridge. Climbed cargo nets up the cliff face like we were boarding a ship in reverse. My aid bag felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I climbed one-handed, holding the net with the other, listening to the sound of my own breathing inside my helmet. We made it to the top. Spread out across the plateau. It looked like farmland. Like the fields back home in Virginia. Peaceful. Quiet. Then the world exploded. Japanese artillery opened up from positions we couldn't see. Mortars fell like hailstones. Machine gun fire came from everywhere and nowhere. Men screamed. Men fell. The peaceful farmland turned into an abattoir in seconds. I ran toward the wounded. It's what I did. It's all I knew how to do. A man was down with his leg torn open. Another with his arm hanging by threads. Another with his face gone, just gone, nothing but red meat where his features used to be. I worked on them in the open. In the fire. Bandaged what could be bandaged. Gave morphine to those who were beyond help. Prayed over the ones I couldn't save. The Japanese counterattacked at dusk. Came screaming out of their positions with bayonets fixed. Our boys fought back, fought hard, but there were too many. We were getting pushed back to the cliff edge. Captain Glover was screaming orders. Screaming for us to hold. But we couldn't hold. We were getting slaughtered. The order came to retreat. The men went down the cargo nets fast, scrambling over each other in their panic. I started to follow. Put my hand on the net. Started to climb down. Then I heard the screaming. They were still up there. The wounded. The ones who couldn't walk. The ones who couldn't drag themselves to the cliff edge. We were leaving them to die. Leaving them to the Japanese, who didn't take prisoners. Who would bayonet them where they lay. I let go of the net. I turned around. I ran back into hell. The first one I found was Lieutenant Phillips. Both legs shattered by a mortar round. He was trying to crawl toward the cliff edge, leaving a trail of blood behind him. I got my arms under his shoulders and dragged him. Dragged him across ground that was being chewed up by machine gun fire. Dragged him to the cliff edge and tied a rope around him and lowered him down the rock face like cargo. Then I went back. I found Sergeant Howell. Gut shot. Bleeding internally. Nothing I could do but give him morphine and pray. I dragged him to the cliff edge anyway. Lowered him down. Prayed that the surgeons could save him. Went back. Found Private Dorsey. Found Corporal Mitchell. Found men whose names I never knew, men from other units, men who'd been left behind in the chaos. I dragged them one by one to the cliff edge. Lowered them down into friendly hands. The Japanese were everywhere. I could hear them. Hear their voices in the darkness. Hear their boots on the ground. I hid in shell craters. Hid in the tall grass. Prayed that they wouldn't see me. They didn't. God was watching over me. I felt it. Felt His hand on my shoulder, guiding me through the darkness. Felt His voice in my ear telling me where to go, who to save next. The sun came up. I was still working. Still dragging men to the cliff edge. My uniform was shredded. My hands were raw and bleeding. My aid bag was empty. But I kept going. One more. Just one more. I don't know how many men I saved that night. I lost count. 20. 30. 40. The army said it was 75. I never counted. I just kept moving until there was no one left to save. Every time I found a wounded man, I prayed. Prayed for the strength to drag him to safety. Prayed that the Japanese wouldn't find us. Prayed that my hands would hold steady while I patched another hole, stopped another bleed. I prayed the 23rd Psalm. Over and over. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. There was nothing green about Hacksaw Ridge. Nothing still about those waters. But the words comforted me. Reminded me that I wasn't alone. There was a moment, maybe around midnight, when I thought I was going to die. I was dragging a man across open ground and a Japanese machine gun opened up. Tracers lit the night like lightning. I could feel the rounds passing over my head. Could hear them snapping the air. I dropped flat. Covered the wounded man's body with my own. Waited for the bullet that would end me. It never came. The gun fell silent. I got up. Kept dragging. Later, I found a Japanese soldier in a crater. He was wounded. Gut shot. Dying. He looked at me with eyes that were terrified and confused. He didn't understand why I wasn't killing him. I gave him water from my canteen. Bandaged his wound as best I could. He died while I was working on him. I prayed over him too. We took Hacksaw Ridge eventually. Took it at a cost that made strong men weep. But we took it. I kept working. Kept treating wounded. Kept running into fire without a weapon to protect myself. The men stopped questioning me. Stopped calling me a coward. They knew better now. I got hit myself on May 21st. Grenade fragment in the leg. Tore through the muscle, missed the bone by inches. I bandaged it myself. Kept working. Couldn't stop. Too many men needed help. Then I got hit again. Sniper round through the arm. Compound fracture. Bone sticking through the skin. That one took me off the line. They evacuated me to a hospital ship. I was angry. Angry that I couldn't help anymore. Angry that my war was over while men were still dying on that island. But I was also relieved. Relieved that I'd survived. Relieved that I'd get to see Dorothy again. Relieved that I'd kept my promise. I hadn't killed anyone. Not one single person. They gave me the Medal of Honor. President Truman himself put it around my neck. Shook my hand. Thanked me for my service. I didn't feel like I deserved it. I'd just done what any medic would do. What any man with faith and courage would do. I'd saved my brothers because they needed saving. The medal felt heavy. Still does. They made me famous. Newspapers wrote stories. Radio programs wanted interviews. People called me a hero. Called me the greatest soldier who never carried a gun. I just wanted to go home. I went home to Virginia. To Dorothy. We built a life together. Had a son. Tried to forget the war. But the war wouldn't forget me. I had nightmares. Still do. I see Hacksaw Ridge in my sleep. See the faces of the men I saved and the faces of the men I couldn't save. Hear the screaming. Hear the artillery. Wake up in a cold sweat, reaching for an aid bag that isn't there. Dorothy understands. She holds me when the nightmares come. Reminds me that I'm home. Reminds me that I'm safe. But I'm never really safe. Part of me is still on that ridge. Still dragging wounded men through the darkness. Still praying for one more. Just one more. My body broke down over the years. The wounds never healed right. The shrapnel in my leg gave me pain that never stopped. I lost most of my hearing from the artillery. Lost a lung to tuberculosis I caught God knows where. The Veterans Administration took care of me as best they could. But some things can't be fixed. Some damage is permanent. I see the other veterans sometimes. Men I served with. Men I saved. They thank me. Tell me they wouldn't be alive without me. Tell me their children and grandchildren wouldn't exist without me. It makes the pain worth it. Makes the nightmares bearable. People ask me how I did it. How I ran into fire without a gun. How I saved 75 men while the world tried to kill me. I tell them it was faith. Simple as that. Faith that God would protect me. Faith that my purpose was to save lives, not take them. Faith that the commandment I'd learned as a boy was worth dying for. I never regretted refusing to carry a weapon. Never. Not even when my own men hated me for it. Not even when officers tried to discharge me. Not even when I was bleeding on Hacksaw Ridge. The sixth commandment is clear. Thou shalt not kill. It doesn't say, thou shalt not kill unless you're in a war. It doesn't say, thou shalt not kill unless someone is trying to kill you. It just says don't kill. I didn't kill. And I survived. And 75 men survived because of it. That's proof enough for me. I'm old now. My time is running short. But I want people to remember something. You don't have to kill to be brave. You don't have to carry a gun to serve your country. You don't have to compromise your beliefs to do what's right. I was just a boy from Virginia who loved God and couldn't bring himself to kill. But I found a way to fight. I found a way to make a difference. I saved lives when everyone around me was taking them. That's what I want to be remembered for. Not the medal. Not the fame. Not the newspaper stories. I want to be remembered as the man who proved that you can go through hell and come out the other side with your soul intact. That you can face the worst humanity has to offer and respond with the best you have to give. I want to be remembered as a man who kept his promise. I remember their faces. Every single one of them. The men I saved on Hacksaw Ridge. The ones who lived and the ones who died in my arms. I remember Lieutenant Phillips. He lived. Went home to Ohio, married his sweetheart, had 3 daughters. Wrote me letters every Christmas until he passed in 1987. I remember Sergeant Howell. He died on the hospital ship. The gut wound was too much. But he died knowing someone tried to save him. Died knowing he wasn't alone. I remember the Japanese soldier I gave water to. I never knew his name. Never will. But he was someone's son. Someone's brother. Someone who deserved dignity in death. I remember Willis from Leyte. I remember Hernandez from Guam. I remember 100 others whose names have faded but whose faces remain crystal clear in my mind. They're why I did it. Why I ran back into the fire. Why I couldn't leave them behind. Because every single one of them mattered. Every single life was worth saving. People always ask the same question. Always. Were you scared? Of course I was scared. I was terrified. Every single moment of every single battle. Terrified that I'd die. Terrified that I'd fail. Terrified that I'd have to watch another man bleed out in my arms and know I couldn't save him. But fear isn't the opposite of courage. Fear is just the price you pay for doing something that matters. You feel the fear, and you do it anyway. I felt the fear on Hacksaw Ridge. Felt it when the bullets were flying and the mortars were falling and the Japanese were hunting me in the darkness. Felt it so strongly my hands shook. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because there was always one more. Always one more man who needed help. One more life I could save. The fear never went away. I just learned to work through it. The movies get it wrong. War isn't glorious. It isn't heroic. It isn't an adventure. War is young men bleeding in the mud. War is watching your friends die and knowing there's nothing you can do to stop it. War is the smell of death and the sound of screaming and the weight of choices you'll carry for the rest of your life. War is necessary sometimes. Evil has to be stopped. Tyranny has to be fought. I understood that. I believed in our cause. But don't ever glorify it. Don't ever make it seem like something it isn't. War is hell. Pure and simple. And the only good thing about it is when it ends and men get to go home. I went home. 75 other men went home because of me. That's the only glory I need. Survivor's guilt is a real thing. It eats at you. Gnaws at your insides like a rat you can't kill. Why did I survive when so many others didn't? Why did God protect me and not them? What made me so special? What made me worth saving? I don't have answers. I've prayed about it for 70 years and I still don't have answers. Maybe there is no answer. Maybe some men live and some men die and there's no reason beyond chance and circumstance. Maybe God works in ways we can't understand. Or maybe I survived because I had work to do. Maybe those 75 men needed saving and I was the only one willing to do it. Maybe my survival served a purpose. I choose to believe that. It makes the guilt easier to bear. I couldn't have done any of it without Dorothy. She was my reason to survive. My reason to keep going when everything in me wanted to give up. I carried her picture through 3 campaigns. Looked at it every night before I slept. Reminded myself what I was fighting for. Not for grand ideals or patriotic slogans. For her. For the life we were going to build together. She waited for me. Wrote me letters every week. Sent me care packages with cookies and socks and reminders of home. Prayed for me every night. When I came home broken, she put me back together. Piece by piece. Day by day. Never complained. Never gave up on me. We had 55 years together before she passed. 55 years of love and laughter and shared memories. She gave me a life worth living after the war tried to take everything from me. I'll see her again soon. I believe that with everything I am. And when I do, I'll thank her. Thank her for waiting. Thank her for believing in me. Thank her for giving me a reason to come home. I used a rope to lower those men off Hacksaw Ridge. A simple rope. Nothing special about it. Just hemp and knots and the strength of my arms. That rope saved more lives than any gun ever could have. I think about that sometimes. Think about the weapons of war and the tools of mercy. Think about what we choose to carry and what that says about who we are. I chose to carry bandages and morphine and a rope. Chose to save lives instead of taking them. And it worked. It actually worked. Maybe that's the lesson. Maybe that's what God wanted me to prove. That mercy is stronger than violence. That saving a life takes more courage than ending one. I don't know if I proved it. But I tried. Every day of that war I tried. The last battle I fought was in May 1945. The last man I saved was a private whose name I never learned. He was unconscious when I found him. Bleeding from a dozen wounds. I patched him up as best I could and got him to the aid station. Then I got hit myself. Twice. And my war was over. Sometimes I wonder about that private. Wonder if he survived. Wonder if he went home to his family, lived a full life, grew old like me. I hope he did. I hope every man I saved got to live the life he deserved. I never wanted to be done. Never wanted to stop helping. But my body gave out. The wounds were too much. The doctors sent me home. I was grateful. And I was heartbroken. Because there were still men who needed help. Still men bleeding and dying. And I couldn't save them anymore. That's the hardest part. Knowing you can't save everyone. Knowing that no matter how hard you try, some men will die anyway. But you save the ones you can. That's all any of us can do. If you're young and you're watching this, listening to an old man ramble about a war that ended before your grandparents were born, I want you to know something. Stand up for what you believe in. No matter what it costs. No matter who tells you you're wrong. No matter how hard it gets. I believed that killing was wrong. I believed it so strongly I was willing to die for it. And I nearly did die for it. But I didn't compromise. I didn't bend. I didn't let anyone convince me to betray my principles. And I proved that you can serve without killing. You can be a soldier without being a killer. You can go through hell and come out the other side with your integrity intact. Whatever you believe in, whatever principles guide your life, hold on to them. Fight for them. Don't let the world grind them down. You'll be tested. You'll be mocked. You'll be told you're naive or stupid or weak. Prove them wrong. You know what I miss most? Silence. Real silence. The kind you get in the mountains before dawn, when the world is holding its breath. The kind that fills your ears with nothing but your own heartbeat. I haven't heard real silence since 1945. The artillery took that from me. Left me with tinnitus, a constant ringing that never stops. A reminder that's always there, even in the quietest moments. But sometimes I imagine it. Imagine standing in the Virginia mountains with Dorothy, watching the sun come up over the hills, hearing nothing but the wind in the trees. That's my heaven. That's what I'm looking forward to. Silence and Dorothy and a sunrise that lasts forever. The men I served with became my brothers. Not by blood, but by something deeper. By shared suffering. By mutual sacrifice. By the knowledge that we'd each die for the other without hesitation. Some of them hated me at first. Thought I was a coward. A liability. A fool who'd get them killed. But they learned. They learned that I'd run into fire for them. That I'd risk my life for theirs. That I'd never leave them behind. And they protected me. When the fighting got heavy, they made sure I stayed safe. Made sure I could do my job. Covered me when I was treating wounded. Gave me the time I needed to save lives. We were a unit. A family forged in fire. And even now, 70 years later, when most of them are gone, I still feel that bond. Still carry them with me. They weren't just the men I saved. They were the men who saved me right back. There was a moment on Hacksaw Ridge when everything clicked into place. When I understood exactly why I was there, and what I was meant to do. I'd just finished dragging a man to the cliff edge. My muscles were screaming. My hands were torn and bleeding. Every part of me wanted to give up, to climb down that net and leave the rest behind. Then I heard someone crying. Not screaming. Crying. Soft. Desperate. The sound of a man who knew he was going to die alone. I followed the sound. Found him in a crater. Kid couldn't have been 19. Belly wound. Intestines visible. He was holding them in with his hands, tears streaming down his face. He looked up at me and said, "Please don't leave me." In that moment, I understood. This wasn't about heroism or medals or proving anything to anyone. This was about simple human decency. About not letting another person die alone in the dark. About being the hand that reaches down when someone is drowning. I stayed with him. Bandaged him as best I could. Dragged him to safety. He died 3 days later in a field hospital. But he didn't die alone. And he didn't die on that ridge. That's what mattered. Medics carried different things than other soldiers. We didn't carry ammunition. Didn't carry grenades. Didn't carry the tools of killing. We carried life. I carried bandages. Rolls and rolls of gauze. Tourniquets. Morphine syringes, a dozen at a time. Sulfa powder for infections. Plasma for blood loss. Scissors. Tape. Iodine. I carried Dorothy's picture. Carried my Bible, worn thin from constant reading. Carried a small cross my mother had given me when I enlisted. I carried the weight of every man I couldn't save. Carried their faces. Carried the knowledge that I'd tried and it hadn't been enough. But mostly, I carried hope. Hope that the next wounded man could be saved. Hope that my hands would stay steady. Hope that God would guide me through one more day. That hope kept me alive. We had an unofficial creed among medics. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody made it official. But we all knew it. We all lived by it. I will save every man I can reach. I will not count the cost to myself. I will go where others will not go. I will stay when others leave. I will give everything I have to keep one more man breathing. Some medics died living that creed. Died running into fire to save wounded. Died because they wouldn't leave a man behind. I almost died for it myself. Multiple times. But that's what separated us from everyone else. We weren't there to kill the enemy. We were there to save our own. And we took that mission seriously, even when it cost us everything. They didn't call it PTSD back then. Called it battle fatigue. Shell shock. Soldier's heart. A dozen different names for the same thing. The mind breaking under pressure it was never meant to bear. I saw it happen to men. Saw them crack in the middle of combat. Saw them curl up in foxholes and refuse to move. Saw them shake so badly they couldn't hold a rifle. Saw the light go out of their eyes. We didn't understand it then. Didn't know how to help them. Just sent them to the rear and hoped they'd recover. Some did. Some didn't. I had my own struggles. Still do. The nightmares. The flashbacks. The way loud noises make me flinch. The way I can't stand to be in crowds because too many people feels like chaos, feels like combat. Dorothy learned to recognize the signs. Learned when I was slipping back into the war in my head. She touched my hand. Say my name softly. Bring me back to the present. It helped. Helps. But the war never really leaves you. It just learns to hide in the corners of your mind, waiting for a trigger to bring it roaring back. This is hard to say. Hard for people to understand. But it needs to be said. The Japanese soldiers were human beings. Sons and brothers and fathers. Men who believed they were fighting for something important. Men who were scared and homesick and wanted to survive. They did terrible things. Fought with a brutality that shocked us. Refused to surrender even when surrender was the only sane option. Committed atrocities that still haunt me. But they were still human. I saw it in the eyes of the soldier I gave water to. Saw the fear and the pain and the recognition that we weren't so different after all. Both of us were just trying to survive a war either of us started. Hating them was easy. Understanding them was harder. But understanding them was necessary. Because if I couldn't see their humanity, I couldn't preserve my own. War turns men into monsters. But only if you let it. I refuse to let it. Death has a smell. It's something you never forget, something that gets into your nose and your clothes and your soul and never quite leaves. On Hacksaw Ridge, death was everywhere. The smell of it mixed with cordite and mud and sweat and fear. It became background noise. Something you stopped noticing after a while. But sometimes, late at night, I smell it again. It comes back without warning. I'll be sitting in my living room and suddenly I'm back on that ridge, surrounded by bodies and blood and the overwhelming stench of decay. Dorothy used to light candles when it happened. Fill the house with good smells. Cinnamon. Pine. Fresh bread. Anything to cover the phantom smell that only I could detect. It helped. But it never really went away. That's what war does. It leaves a mark. An invisible scar that no one else can see but that you carry with you every moment of every day. I prayed constantly during combat. Every moment I wasn't actively treating a wounded man, I was praying. Prayed for strength. Prayed for guidance. Prayed for protection. Prayed that my hands would stay steady and my mind would stay clear and my courage wouldn't fail. Prayed for the wounded. Prayed for the dying. Prayed for the dead. Prayed for the enemy too. Prayed that they would see the futility of continuing to fight. Prayed that the war would end and we could all go home. Some people might think it's strange, praying for the men who were trying to kill you. But Jesus commanded us to love our enemies. To pray for those who persecute us. I took that seriously. My faith sustained me through the worst moments. When I was terrified and exhausted and ready to quit, prayer gave me the strength to keep going. I don't know if God answered all my prayers. I lost a lot of men despite my best efforts. But I know He heard them. And I know He was with me on that ridge. I felt His presence. As real as the ground under my feet. The Medal of Honor weighs less than a pound. But it feels heavier than anything I've ever carried. It represents the men I saved. The men I couldn't save. The sacrifice of everyone who fought and bled and died in that war. It represents a standard I'm not sure I lived up to. People treat me differently because of it. Look at me with a kind of reverence I don't deserve. Call me a hero. Ask for autographs and photographs. I'm not a hero. I was just a medic doing his job. The real heroes are the ones who didn't come home. The ones who died on those islands. The ones whose names are carved on memorials nobody visits. I wear the medal at ceremonies because the army asks me to. Because it's important to remember the war and the men who fought it. But I don't wear it for myself. I wear it for them. For the 75. For all the others who came home broken. For the ones who didn't come home at all. If I could go back and talk to that scared boy from Virginia, the one who was about to enlist, I'd tell him a few things. I'd tell him it's going to be harder than he can imagine. That he'll be tested in ways he can't prepare for. That he'll see things that will haunt him for the rest of his life. But I'd also tell him to stay true to himself. To hold on to his faith even when everyone around him says it's foolish. To remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right despite the fear. I'd tell him that he's going to save lives. That 75 men are going to go home to their families because of him. That his choice to serve without killing will matter more than he can possibly understand. I'd tell him to appreciate every moment with Dorothy. To tell her he loves her every single day. To hold her tight and never let go. And I'd tell him that he's going to survive. That the war won't break him. That he'll live to be an old man with grandchildren and great-grandchildren and a life filled with more blessings than he deserves. It's going to be okay, I'd tell him. It's all going to be okay. My last trip up Hacksaw Ridge was the hardest. Not because of the Japanese. Not because of the artillery. But because I knew it was the last time. The sun was starting to rise. The cliff face was visible in the gray dawn light. I'd been working all night. Dragging men. Lowering them to safety. My body was beyond exhausted. Beyond pain. Running on nothing but will and prayer. I found one more wounded man. Just one more. He was unconscious. Shrapnel wounds across his back and legs. I didn't know if he'd survive the trip down. But I had to try. I got the rope around him. Started lowering him down the cliff. My hands were so raw the rope burned like fire. My arms shook with fatigue. But I held on. Got him down. Got him to safety. Then I collapsed. They found me lying at the edge of the cliff, too exhausted to move. Carried me down themselves. I tried to tell them there might be more wounded up there, but I couldn't make the words come out. I'd given everything I had. There was nothing left. The hospital ship was clean. Quiet. Safe. Everything the war wasn't. I lay in a bed with white sheets and felt guilty. Guilty that I was safe while men were still fighting. Guilty that I was resting while others were dying. Guilty that my war was over. The nurses were kind. Changed my bandages. Gave me morphine for the pain. Let me sleep for the first time in days. I dreamed of Hacksaw Ridge. Dreamed I was still there, still dragging wounded men through the darkness. Woke up reaching for my aid bag. It took weeks for the physical wounds to heal. The mental wounds took longer. Still haven't healed completely. They shipped me back to the States in June. Back to Virginia. Back to Dorothy. She was waiting for me at the train station. I saw her before she saw me. She looked exactly the same. Beautiful. Perfect. Everything good in the world. When she saw me, she ran. Ran straight into my arms. We held each other and cried, and I knew, finally knew, that I was really home. The war was over for me. Coming home didn't mean forgetting. Didn't mean the war released its grip on my mind. I'd wake up screaming. Frightened Dorothy half to death. She'd hold me and tell me I was safe, but I wasn't safe. Part of me was still on that ridge. Still running through the fire. I couldn't talk about it. Not for years. Couldn't find the words to explain what it had been like. How do you tell someone about the smell of death? About the sound of a man dying? About the weight of knowing you couldn't save everyone? I went to church. Prayed. Tried to find peace. Some days I found it. Some days I didn't. Work helped. I got a job. Kept my hands busy. Focused on building a future instead of reliving the past. Dorothy and I had our son. Watching him grow, teaching him to be a good man, gave me purpose. But the war was always there. Always lurking in the background. Always ready to pull me back. I learned to live with it. That's all you can do. Learn to carry the weight and keep moving forward. Over the years, I went to reunions. Saw the men I'd served with. The ones who'd survived. Some of them had done well. Built good lives. Raised families. Found success and happiness. They'd taken the war and put it behind them, built something better. Others hadn't been so lucky. Some were broken. Drinking too much. Couldn't hold jobs. Couldn't maintain relationships. The war had taken something from them they could never get back. We'd sit together and remember. Remember the men who didn't make it home. Remember the battles. Remember what it felt like to be young and scared and fighting for our lives. And we'd thank each other. Thank each other for being there. For doing what needed to be done. For surviving together. Lieutenant Phillips came to every reunion until he died. Always found me first thing. Always shook my hand and said, "You saved my life, Doss." And I'd always say, "We saved each other." Because it was true. I saved his body. He saved my spirit. Gave me purpose. Gave me a reason to keep going when everything in me wanted to quit. We were brothers. We'll always be brothers. Dorothy paid a price for my service too. A price nobody talks about. She married a whole man and got back someone broken. Someone who woke up screaming. Someone who flinched at loud noises. Someone who couldn't always be present because part of him was still fighting a war that ended decades ago. She never complained. Never made me feel like a burden. But I saw it in her eyes sometimes. Saw the worry. Saw the fear that I was slipping away from her. She became my medic. Tended my wounds, both visible and invisible. Pulled me back from the edge when the memories got too heavy. Gave me a reason to stay in the present instead of living in the past. I don't know what I would have done without her. Probably would have ended up like some of the other veterans. Lost. Broken. Unable to function. She saved me as surely as I saved those 75 men on Hacksaw Ridge. I just wish I could have been the husband she deserved. The whole, undamaged man she married. But war doesn't leave you whole. It takes pieces of you and never gives them back. She understood. She stayed anyway. That's love. Real love. The kind that endures despite everything. People want heroes. Want to believe that some men are braver, stronger, better than others. Want to believe that heroism is a quality some people are born with. It's not. Heroism is just ordinary people making the choice to do something despite being terrified. It's choosing to act when every instinct tells you to run. It's putting someone else's life ahead of your own comfort, your own safety, your own survival. I wasn't born brave. I was born with a conscience and a faith that told me certain things were right and certain things were wrong. I chose to follow that faith even when it was hard. Even when it nearly got me killed. That's all heroism is. A choice. Made over and over again in moments when choosing wrong would be easier. Every man on Hacksaw Ridge was a hero. Every man who picked up a rifle and faced the enemy despite his fear. Every man who charged into fire because his brothers needed him. I just chose a different way to fight. But we were all fighting. We were all scared. We were all heroes. I'm 91 years old today. Most of the men I served with are gone now. The war fades a little more each year, becomes something people read about in history books instead of something they remember. But I remember. I'll remember until the day I die. I remember the cold metal of the cargo net under my hands as I climbed Hacksaw Ridge. I remember the weight of wounded men as I dragged them to safety. I remember the prayers I whispered in the darkness. I remember every face. Every name I knew. Every life I saved and every life I couldn't save. People ask me if I have regrets. I do. I regret every man who died despite my best efforts. Every man I reached too late. Every wound I couldn't heal. But I don't regret my choice to serve without killing. Don't regret holding on to my faith when everyone told me to let it go. Don't regret running back into hell to save my brothers. Those choices defined me. Made me who I am. And who I am, at the end of the day, is a man who can look himself in the mirror without shame. That's worth more than any medal. I'm tired now. Tired in my bones. Tired in my soul. I've lived a long life. Longer than I probably deserved. Longer than the men who died on those islands. But I'm ready. Ready to rest. Ready to see Dorothy again. Ready to be free of the pain and the memories and the weight I've carried for 70 years. Before I go, I want to say one last thing. War is not the answer. It never has been. It's a failure. A breakdown of humanity. A last resort that should never become the first option. But if war comes, if you find yourself called to serve, remember this: you don't have to become a monster to fight monsters. You don't have to lose your humanity to preserve it. Find a way to serve that aligns with who you are. With what you believe. With the person you want to be when the war is over. I found my way. I served. I saved lives. I kept my soul intact. You can too. Hold on to what matters. Hold on to your faith, your principles, your humanity. Don't let the war take those from you. And remember the men who didn't come home. Remember their sacrifice. Honor it by building a world that doesn't need more wars, more sacrifice, more young men bleeding in foreign soil. That's my message. That's what I want you to take from this old man's story. Be brave. Be true. Be human. Even when the world is hell. Especially when the world is hell.